Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the last of our Athena sessions. Very excited to be able to hand over to Chadney from Cisco, who is going to talk to you all about building a chatbot. So Chadney, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alex. I'll just quickly share my screen. Okay, hopefully you guys can see that all okay and see me and hear me all okay. My name is Chandni Panchal, and as Alex said, I'm from Cisco. I am a systems engineer or developer advocate, I like to say sometimes. And I work in a team called the Developer Advocacy Team for the UK and Ireland. So we kind of focus on all things programmability, what I like to call, the caller projects that you might get to work on in a company such as Cisco. So all things sort of integration and programmability and API focused. And that's really one of the main focuses of the workshop that we're going to be doing today. So I'm really excited to be able to take you all through it. And thank you so much for joining this session. Let's just get straight into it. So you might not know too much about Cisco. Maybe this hackathon is the first time you're being introduced to Cisco as a company and as an organization. So just as a little bit of background, Cisco is pretty much all about connecting the unconnected. And that could be whether it's going all the way back to its roots. So for example, if we think about how Cisco was founded all the way back a good 30 or so years now, we had a couple that wanted to communicate cross campus and didn't have the technology at the time to do so. So they themselves came up with the solution of connecting themselves via IT. And that was how the first ever router was born. And I think that really summarizes quite well a lot of what Cisco focuses on connecting the unconnected. Now that stretches so much further than just having networking such as switches and routers. It's thinking about such as IoT, so the Internet of Everything, and connections between things that you never thought you might need to have, but now IT can enable you to do that. You can see a couple of the things on the slide that Cisco do focus on, along with networking, which is something that they're the most known for. But something that the team that I work in focuses on, and other bigger teams as well within the organization, is things like emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, helping organizations change their sort of IT culture and practices as well. So not so much just looking at solutions, but also making them understand how evolving their IT practices and their pipelines and their cultures can help them as a business to succeed slightly more. So that's a really quick high-level overview of Cisco and of me and the team that I work in. I want to get on to the super fun stuff of today, and that's the workshop itself. So I'm going to move straight on. In today's session, we're going to be building a chatbot, as Alex said. And we're not just going to be building a chatbot, that's one component of it. The main part of what we're doing today is introducing you to the idea of serverless technology. Now, if that's something you've never seen of or heard of before, that's completely fine. We're going to be going from the absolute ground up, and it's targeted at people who might not have seen it at all. So don't worry if this is new. If it is something you've seen before, this might be a great way to explore maybe something else about it that you wouldn't have known before, or be able to maybe get hands-on with it for the first time. So we will be creating a chatbot, but the underlying infrastructure for that will be serverless technology. So let's look at all of this sort of broken up into separate components. The first thing we're going to be using is Webex Teams. Now, you might have heard of Cisco Webex in terms of the streaming platform we're using today to get you this feed to YouTube. But there's also more to Webex than just this video conferencing solution. One of those things that also adds to that video conferencing is a messaging platform called Webex Teams. Now, you can use this messaging platform the same way you might use other messaging platforms that you're familiar with. However, this takes it to a more corporate level. So you can do things like messaging, calling, and secure file sharing within this platform. I've written on there, it's like Slack, but a little bit better. And of course, you'll understand why I'm so biased to say something like that. But I guess for us developers in the room, what's most important is the fact that it has open APIs. And that's what we're going to be leveraging today. We're going to be creating a chatbot. Now, a chatbot is just a piece of interactive software that you can communicate with via a messaging platform. So you might already be familiar with this when you go to certain websites and you try to speak to some sort of help desk agent. They might ask you a series of questions to help understand what it is you're trying to get support with, and then direct you to the relevant representative to help you. Now, all of those steps in between aren't always human that you're interacting with, even though it might seem like it because of their responses. Most usually, it's actually a piece of software that's been programmed to respond in a certain way based on the kind of words and language you're sending across to that bot. And that's what we call a chatbot, and we'll be building one of them today. It simulates human conversation. So like I said, it can be difficult to tell whether you're speaking to a person or a bot. And that's sort of the ideal situation. You want it to feel as real as possible. The next thing we're going to be looking at is Amazon Web Services. Now, you could use whatever cloud platform you are comfortable with. Today, we'll only be focusing on AWS. And we'll be using something called serverless computing. So if we think about when a developer goes ahead and creates some sort of application code, unfortunately, you don't always just get to think about what it is you focus on, such as application code. You have to also have other considerations made when you're developing this app. Now, that includes what is the server that this application is going to sit on? What about the networking that's required for the code itself? How do we keep this code secure, for example? Now, these are all considerations that this developer needs to have, or teams that this developer will need to work with to make it all run smoothly. But serverless technology, which you might have also heard of as function as a code, it allows you to just zoom in on the one thing you care about, and that is the app code itself, not all those other considerations that you're forced to make because you need to protect the app. And now this service provider, in our case, Amazon Web Services, is the one that takes care of all of that surrounding stuff that you don't really want to think about. And it allows you to just focus on the code itself for the app. So serverless technology works really, really great when you have some sort of event trigger. So for example, our chatbot today will run to some sort of trigger and then behave accordingly. So these kind of situations lend themselves really, really well to serverless technology. And the reason why we thought this would be a great opportunity for the hack is because you don't just need to create a chatbot that in our situation is going to send a joke back to you. You can make that, once you know the foundation, just make that chatbot do whatever you want it to, as long as there's APIs that are available to leverage. You can connect them to Webex Teams bots, get it to behave in the way you'd like it to, so it could be something more relevant to the theme of circular economy. Within serverless computing, there's a couple of things we're going to be leveraging. The first is Aws Lambda, and that's where you upload your code called function as a code. That's where the developer gets to focus just on what they care about and not the rest. And the second part is having an API gateway, and I'll show you a bit more about how this fits into the pipeline of what it is we're creating. The next thing we're going to be looking at is Python. If you haven't worked with Python before, that's completely fine. I've chosen to work with Python because it's one of the most common programming languages being used at the moment, and it lends itself perfectly to this use case. I can achieve everything I want to do in this using this programming language, especially because it's a function-based language. That sort of forms the back end of what it is we're trying to create. And if you've not worked with Python, you're not going to be expected today to have to sit and code everything. In this case, this Python is being used to tell the bot how to behave when that trigger from AWS is set off. So we're starting to see now how these components will fit together, but we'll talk about it a bit more in a second. So the Python bit is all about teaching our bot how to respond when it's triggered off. In our case, it's going to be for it to send a joke back to the user that interacts with it. So let's talk a little bit more about the architecture here. You have your user who wants to interact with this chatbot. In this example, you can see I've got a bot created previously before called Dad Jokes. So I mention it in my message and I make sure I talk directly at that bot using the @ symbol at the front of that message. And I know my result at the end is for that bot to go and retrieve a joke from a database and post that joke back to me. So I know where I'm starting and I know where I'm finishing. So it's going to end with that bot sending me a joke because I've messaged it and asked for one. But the question is, how on earth do we get these two things to link? How do we get my initial message to this chatbot to then result in that chatbot returning with the behavior I want it to return with? So in this case, it's a bot. You could program in your Python code whatever you wanted your bot to do, whether it's return the weather or find out traffic from A to B or recommend local restaurants. It could be anything you want it to be, but how do we connect the two? Let's zoom in a little bit more. We need something to trigger our code off. We don't want our bot to just endlessly supply me with jokes that get pretty annoying after a while. So we want something to sort of trigger it off, and it only responds in that instant. So we're going to have some sort of trigger. We set this up using something called a webhook, and I'll take you through the Webex Teams webhook that will support our bot. Now, there's two ways we can sort of connect A to B here. We can have our Python code consistently asking the bot, have you received this trigger? Have you received this trigger? And so on. And the bot will respond, no, 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 until eventually maybe it does at one point. And then it says, yes, I've got a trigger. Here you go. Please go and execute your Python code and make me behave the way the code suggests. But I'm sure you can hear, even just from how the way I'm describing it, is quite an inefficient way forward. So we're trying to do something more efficient than consistently asking if the bot's behavior needs to be executed. Instead, we use something called a webhook, which listens out consistently for that trigger. And when that trigger happens, so when I do message that bot, the webhook just goes, right, I've heard what I need to hear. Go ahead and do this. It saves that sort of back and forth conversation, if you like. So that's what we'll be using to bridge part of this gap between A and B. So what will that Webex Teams webhook do once it has received the thing it's listening out for? Well, it's going to post to an API that we'll create today in AWS using the AWS API Gateway. And that API basically says, the webhook has heard exactly what it was looking out for. Now I'm going to push that code to be executed. So I'm kind of like the start button. So we send a message to the bot. The webhook hears that we've gone and triggered off this event. And it says, right, go ahead and push the start button. So the API is that start button that says code's going to start running now. And that's how we've bridged the middle bit of going from A to B. I'm just going to show you all of the architecture together now. So you've got the user sending a message to our bot saying, hey, I'd like you to send me a joke. Sending that message triggers our webhook, which has been listening out for when that bot is messaged by a user. It hears what it's been listening out for. So it says, right, I'm going to push to this API. We need to start running the code. That triggers off our code. And you can see in the little screenshot that there's two parts of the code. First of all, there's obtaining the joke from a database. And the second thing is posting that joke. So finally, that joke is sent back to the original user that started this whole process off. Now, I know for a couple of people on this call, I can understand that everything we're using today is going to be new, and that's okay. We've got comprehensive lab guides to walk you through what we're doing. I'm going to take you through it step by step. And I've also got my brilliant colleagues on the call and on YouTube as well, ready to help answer any questions. So if you do have questions, please feel free to post them and we'll do our best, the three of us, to get back to you on them. The first thing we're going to do is set up our workspace. So there's a couple of things you need to do. Let me stop sharing this first of all. The first thing you'll need to do is create an AWS account. So I'll just let this load up. So mine's already logged in, but if we can get the link sent out on the YouTube chat for registering for an AWS account, that's the first thing you're going to need to do. It does ask you for when you sign up, but everything we do in today's workshop is going to be within the free tier that you're registering for. So you're not going to be charged anything, even though you have to provide the details. No money will be taken out from the work that we do in this workshop because we're remaining well within our free limits of AWS. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to go ahead and create an account on AWS. The second thing that my colleague will also send over, which will be beneficial, is a lab guide that talks you through everything step by step, and it also includes the links you need to register for AWS. So it's a GitHub repo, and it's called Chatbot 101 with Aws Lambda, and that will talk you through everything I'm going to do in this workshop. So if for whatever reason you aren't able to finish with me today, you can go back and read this and have a go yourself at another time. It's really well documented. It also has the links in there, so that will help you find the correct links to sign up for AWS Lambda if you haven't already. So I'll just give you a minute or two to get yourself signed up, and then we'll move on to the next bit. Once you've signed up, if you wouldn't mind just popping into the chat that you've managed to sign up. And as we get your responses back, we'll move on to the next thing. Roger, maybe if you could let me know when people are starting to type in that they've managed to sign up for AWS.
It'd be good to move on in just another 60 seconds or so, Chandni.
Perfect, thank you. And I will say as well that I'll pause throughout.
It'd be good to move on.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Roger. So we'll move on now. I will pause throughout the workshop. So if there's any parts of this you didn't get to do, you can go back and finish them up then as well. So the next thing you need to do, if you haven't already, is register for Cisco Webex Teams. So I'll just show you. I haven't got the page up here, but if you just follow the link that my colleague will be posting into the chat, let me get this here. You should open up to a page like this when you follow that link. And what you want to do is start for free in the top right-hand corner. You won't be asked for any credit card payments or details for this one. You literally just sign up with your details and you'll be in. When you have signed up for Webex Teams, you will see a page that looks like this. So I will give you another minute or so just to quickly register. It shouldn't take too long with the Webex Teams one. And I know it's a bit of a boring start, but it gets much better once we've got all of the admin stuff out of the way. So this is the last thing that I need you guys to sign up for. And then we're going to get cracking on with the code and with actually building our chatbot. This is the last bit. I'll just give you guys another 60 seconds or so, and then we'll move on again.
Just a couple of people logging on to the, or signing up to the Webex channel, so a couple of minutes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Sure.
I'll just re-emphasize that we posted the link to your GitHub repo. So if you do fall behind, you can easily catch up on all the links for the sign up to AWS, and Webex is in there as well.
Yeah, exactly. And also on the lab guide, there are sort of GIFs that describe each step. So this isn't the only time you'll get to sort of see someone doing what it is we're asking you to do throughout this workshop. You'll have small little like short video clips of the steps as well. Just give it sort of another minute or so then, and then we'll move on. Okay, so I'm going to start moving on to the next couple of steps. As Roger says, if you haven't managed to do it yet, please use the lab guide, and I'll pause as we go through the future steps so you can go back and finish things off if you haven't done it already. Creating the Webex Teams account is the more important step as opposed to AWS. So if you haven't got around to doing this, I would say do this bit first. Go ahead and make your Webex account first. Sign up for free. Once you log in, you will see a page something similar to what you have here. Now, Webex is, as I said earlier, sort of all-in-one collaboration platform. So you can do video conferencing, live streaming like we're doing today, recordings of your conference calls. But you can do all kinds of other things such as messaging. Messaging is a major part of whiteboarding, interactive whiteboarding at the same time as other people who are within that same team as you, and creating that sort of organized structure within your messaging as well when you have teams and spaces dedicated to different projects, for example. So if you look at the screen you've got here in front of you, once you have registered for Webex and you've managed to sign in, there's a couple of things about joining meetings, fine, but we're not going to be working with that today. Maybe you can explore that another time. On the left-hand side, underneath dashboard, there's a tab called messaging, and that's what we're going to be working with today. So go ahead and click on messaging, and you'll see your Webex Teams browser client here as mine is. It will look pretty clean unless you've used Webex before. You won't have any messages with anyone or anything else sort of populating your screen at the moment, but we will be populating it as we go through this session. You can see a couple of things. So for example, if I wanted to message somebody, click on the plus and send a direct message or create a space. I can filter by all sorts of different things that I want to. You can have direct messages and team messages as well. We're going to leave this blank just for a second. We just needed to get it set up. Now that you've got your Webex Teams account or your Webex account, I'd like you to go to developer.webex.com. So developer.webex.com. This is sort of the one-stop shop for all things programmability related when you talk about Webex. So if you want documentation on the APIs, this is where you'd find it. If you want to create a bot, for example, this is where you can do that. You can see a couple of options on the home page already of other things you can create as well as a bot, and loads of support and information and guides and tutorials are all based on sort of developer.webex.com when you're looking at the Webex. So go ahead and get to developer.webex.com. We're going to go ahead and create ourselves a chatbot. So we're doing step 1 here. When you get to developer.webex.com, you're going to need to sign in. Please use the same credentials that you used when you created your Webex account for Teams. So the one you just created just now, use that when you log in. And once you have logged in, you should be able to see all of this. And instead of like a login symbol, you'll see either your initials or a display picture if that's what you've put up for yourself. Once you've signed in, click on your icon on the right-hand side and click My Webex Apps. So you should see something like this. So create a new app, and there's a couple of different apps you can create. We're not going to focus on the other two so much today. We're only going to focus on the bot. So go ahead and select Create a Bot. Very simple. They've made it straightforward for us to create the bot, which means we can focus on the fun part, which is programming our bot to do what we want it to do. All we have to do to create our chatbot, so the actual piece of software that we're going to interact with, is just fill in this simple form that you can see on your screen. You want to give your bot a name. So I might call mine Athena Bot 21, just even Athena Bot. And you want to give it a username. Now, this username has to be unique. So let's see if we can find something that hasn't been used before. This might be okay. Oh, it's not available. So let's say Athena Bot 21. Okay, this is available. So I'm going to have my bot's email address as athenabot2021@webex.bot. You'll have to use something different, but you can make it whatever you want as long as it's unique. Then you want to select an icon. So when you're interacting with this bot, you want to that you're speaking with, make it whatever you like. You put it. I'm just going to go for the first default, and you want to give it a short description. In this workshop, our bot is going to do something quite simple. It's going to retrieve a joke for us. In the future, when you create a bot that has some other purpose, you can describe that purpose in this box here. So I'll just say, this bot will send you a joke. Finally, just click the Add Bot button on the bottom right-hand side. And that will do what it needs to do. And congratulations, we have created our bot. So I've created my Athena bot. And the first thing you have to do before you even think about navigating away from this page is copy your bot's access token. Once this page leaves, you will not have access to this token again, and you'll have to regenerate a new one if you want one. But this is quite important to what we're going to be doing today. We need this token to authenticate our bot. In order for the bot to be able to do it, it needs to prove it has the rights and that it's allowed to do what it wants to do. And this token will help us do that. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it on a notepad that I have open here. And this is our bot ID, our bot access token. In the future, you can go ahead and have a look at some of the resources that are available. For now, we'll skip through that. And here's a little review of the form that we filled out. So we've got our bot's name, our bot's username, icon, and so on. So the bot's username is quite important. I'm going to be using that to communicate with the bot. I'm going to go back to my Webex Teams client, so the messaging platform. On the plus button at the top, I'm going to create a space. So I'm selecting the bottom option, create a space. And I'm going to add my bot to the space. So let me paste in its email address. I'm going to just hit enter. So you might have seen the message that came up and said Athena bot at webex.bot hasn't got an account yet. Would you like to invite them? Don't worry about clicking the invite button, just hit enter and it will find it and add it for you. So you can see it's managed to find mine and just add it in at the bottom. You want to give your space a name. So this is what we're creating here, is basically like a group chat. So we want to create a space name. I'm going to call mine Athena Workshop 2021, but you can call it whatever you want. It's just the name of your group chat if you like with this bot. Go ahead and hit create. And you can see I've now got a messaging platform here where I can type messages. So I might write hello. I can attach documents. I can go ahead and add GIFs. I can do all kinds of things in this. Now that we've got this set up, we can start moving on to the next step. So what I'll do is I'll pause for a minute now. Please use the lab guide to move forward if you're not up to where we are at the moment, and feel free to ask any questions in the YouTube chat window as well, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, I'm going to start moving forward a little bit more. Just to recap what we've done so far. We started off with the very admin-y parts of what we need to do, so creating accounts, for example. We had the AWS free tier account and the Webex Teams free account. And now we've just gone ahead and done our first step of actually putting our solution together, and that's creating the chatbot. We've got a Webex Teams room, and in that room, we've added ourselves and the chatbot so we can communicate with it. You can see in my screen that I've sent a message hello to the bot. Nothing's really happened. There's no response. And that's because we haven't got to that part where we program our bot to behave in a certain way. We haven't told our bot what to do. It just exists for the time being, but it doesn't have its purpose just yet. So we're going to start moving on to filling out that Python script that tells the bot what to do. Now, in order for us to fill out that Python script, there's sort of a couple of pieces of information that we need first, and that is the bot's ID, which we've already got from creating the bot. We also need a bit of information about this room that the bot is in, so it knows where to post its messages. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and get that piece of information now. We're going to make sure we can uniquely identify this Webex Teams room so the bot knows where to post its response. We're going to do this on developer.webex.com again. So if you navigate back to your tab where you created the bot, and that's developer.webex.com, and you want to hit the documentation button at the top. You can get all sorts of information here, so much information about using the platform and the support required and all the things we can do if you really want to get creative with it. But we're going to focus on obtaining that sort of unique room ID so the bot knows where to respond with its you can do that by looking at left-hand panel and API reference. So what we're leveraging now in order to obtain that room ID is Webex Teams Open API. If you hit API reference and scroll all the way down to the place that says rooms and select that, what you can see is all the different APIs we can leverage to perform actions against a room. Now that can be list all the rooms that I'm a part of. It could be create a new room. It could be delete a room. So all of these actions I can do either manually on Webex Teams by clicking, for example, that plus button to create a room like we just did, or I can do it programmatically using something like Python that will run a Python script and then programmatically do these changes for me. The third way you can do this is actually directly from developer.webex.com. And this is a great place to get started if you're new with working with APIs, because it makes it really easy to, for example, what do we want to do now, we want to list the rooms we're part of. And when we list those rooms, we're going to get information about those rooms, such as that unique room ID. There's a form here that can be filled out, but you can see the most important things have already been pre-populated for us. So we've got our personal access token, which identifies who we are and authenticates us to use this API. And also to get information about the rooms that we're part of. I shouldn't be able to get information about your room and you shouldn't be able to get it about mine. So this access token allows you to only see what you're allowed to see. And then I'm just going to go and hit run. I'm not even going to change anything for this form. You can see here a 200 OK response, which means my API request was successful. And you can see that there's a bit of information here. The title of the room that it found is Athena Workshop 2021, which is correct. It's the one I just created. You can see that it's a group. It's got like multiple people in it. And it's also ID. So the very first thing that comes up is the ID. Now this is that unique room ID that we need. So I'm going to copy and paste that into my notes that I've got open. Let me just pop that in there. And that's something I'm going to be using later on. So go ahead and navigate to documentation, rooms, list rooms, and just hit run. When you get the ID, make sure you copy and paste that somewhere safe. If you're following along on the lab guide that was posted to the GitHub one that says Chatbot 101 with Aws Lambda, we're now on the section that says obtaining room ID. That's the heading of the part we're on right now. While we're waiting, is there any questions or are we all okay on that front? I'm going to assume that we're all good for questions. I'll give it maybe another 30 seconds and then we're going to move on to stuff that's way more fun than what we've done so far. This has all been slightly admin-y, sort of getting the information we need. Creating the chatbot was pretty cool, but the rest of it was a bit admin-y. So now we're going to move on to actually putting some programming behind our bot. I'll just give you another sort of 10-15 seconds and then we'll move on.
Chandy, Pedro and I discovered we can't post the links in the on YouTube, but Alex can. So Alex, actually, if you scroll up, those who are following along, the links are there. If you can't find them, Alex will repost them to the lab guide again.
Thank you so much for doing that. Okay, so if you've now got the GitHub repo link, you will have all the information you need to sort of catch up with what we've done before. But you'll also be able to clone that repo. And I think cloning that repo is really important for this next step because it saves you from having to, like copy all of what this code is going to do. And there's not that much in it. So don't feel intimidated at all. We'll go through it step by step anyway, but it's a short Python script. If you can clone that repo, you'll have a Python file in there called chatbot.py. Now that's the Python script that we're going to be editing with bits of information. So we're really doing sort of the cooler stuff of this workshop, which is the back-end programming of the Python for this bot. So go ahead and clone that with git clone and then the URL that you'll get from Alex. And then have a look at what directories and what sort of files you have once you have cloned that down. The most important thing, the only thing really that we're going to be working with is chatbot.py. So that's our Python file. I'll open my code here on the screen as well. where I put this, I think, there we go. I'm going to open. Hopefully you can all see that okay as well. So there's a little bit of commentary on this script to help you get through it. There's also a more detailed description of this Python script in the lab guide, but we'll talk through it step by step. Basically, this code has a really small amount of actions that are taking place, but it has the biggest impact in terms of making our bot behave the way we want it to. The first thing that this script is going to do is it's going to obtain a joke from a database full of jokes. Now, just a little disclaimer, these jokes are not mine. They're not the best jokes, but they work for what we're doing. So that is the iCanHasDad joke database. If you just navigate to their website, you'll be able to see their database of jokes anyway. It has open APIs, one of the most easily accessible open APIs you can play around with, because you just sort of ping it and it sends a joke. And that's really a nice way to get started with working with APIs. Once it's got that joke, it's going to post it to the relevant Webex Teams room for us. So it's going to respond to that user that initially triggered off this whole process that we're creating. Now, there's only really two things you need to do here, and those are two substitutions. If we scroll down here, the first thing is you can see room ID equals, and just insert room ID here. You can see this line 29 on my one here. All that's saying is, where is my bot going to have to respond with its joke? Like, where should it post it? Now you need to copy and paste the room ID that you obtained earlier into that quotation marks there. So leave the quotation marks as they are, you need them.
Sandy, sorry for interrupting you. I think there's a few people that are having issues cloning the repo. So if you want to go through that one more time, so that people can get back on track.
Perfect. Thanks for bringing that up, Pedro. So let me just hold this here. I'm gonna see where I am. So don't worry about what I'm doing just for now.
Also, if you can show how to do it from your GitHub repo guide, I think people are following that as well.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Chandy.
No, that's all right. Thanks for bringing that up. So the first thing you want to do is clone the repo itself. So what you can do is you can click on the link that Alex has sent, and it'll pull up the lab guide just on like a web browser, like Firefox or what it is using. And what you can do is you can clone it. Now, what that means is you pull all of those files that you're looking at online onto your own local laptop. And that means you can edit things, you can play around with it. And that's what we're going to ask you to do with the Python file that's also up there. So let me move this over for a second and show you. If you just click on the link that Alex has sent for the repo, this is what you'll see. And you can see the Chatbot 101 at the top. Now, if you scroll down, you have the lab guide, which starts here, and it tells you all the steps that we're going to do. It has all the links to register for Amazon, AWS, sorry, for Teams, etc. But it also has a couple of other files at the top. Now, the images we don't really care about too much. That's just the GIFs you see in the guide itself. A license, just because I need that to upload it. The README is the actual lab guide that you're looking at down here. And the fourth one is chatbot.py. So that's the Python file that we need. Looking at it and being able to has, I want to be able to clone it so you can play around with it. So you can see it here, but we're going to clone it so we can play around with it. So let's go back to the main page. If you hit this green button down here, you get a link. And it says, this is what you need basically to be able to clone it. So you're going to copy that link. Go onto your terminal or command prompt and go into whatever directory file you want to save it in. So for example, if you haven't worked with terminal before, it's super simple, and I'll just walk you through the easiest steps. Open your terminal and have a look at, for example, type in ls and hit enter. And that shows you all of the files that are within the file you're currently in. So if I show you the same thing on Finder, for example, you can see my Finder folder here. All of these box code, all of these on the left side, you're seeing listed here. Now I want to go into the folder that says code. So I do that by typing change directory. And you just write CD to change directory, and then the directory you want to go into. So I want to go into code. So I'm now in this folder here. If I hit ls again, so list like ls, all of the things that come up are the folders within code. So that's all of these things here you can see. I can actually see it on my terminal as well. Now within them, say I want to go into Athena 21, I can change directory again and go into Athena 21. I can hit ls again to see what's inside Athena 21, and I can see the only file that's in there is Chatbot. So you can see how my terminal is just sort of reflecting what's actually in my folders in real life. Now what you want to do is clone. So I'm going to come out of this because I don't want to clone it here. And I'll just clone it into bubble here. And the way you do that is you type git clone, and then you paste this thing here that you've copied from the URL here that you can see. So I'll copy that, git clone this, and you can see it's cloning. So it will take a bit of time to pull this down, and that's all you need to do to be able to access these files on your own local machine. So what you'll be able to see once that's done is that in here, I'll also have a new folder which will say Chatbot 101 with Aws Lambda. So we'll wait for that to come through because it's still taking a little bit of time. So go ahead and type in this command here, so git space clone, and then paste the URL that you get from clicking this little drop arrow here on the green button, paste that in. So I'm not going to wait for that to finish because I've already got it. It's a bit on mine because of all the things I've got up and running at the same time. So I hope that's helped you clone it onto your local machine. And now that you've got that, once it is cloned, you can just go into the folder. So mine is here, and just open this. You can open it on sort of any text editor you like. It doesn't have to be anything specific. I'm using one called VS Code. You can use any text editor you prefer. And that's when you'll see this Python file that I showed you online now opening up on your local machine, and then you can start making edits. Whilst it's on my GitHub, you can't edit it and add your own bots information. So that's why we ask you to download it and change it to your own Git, your own bot token, your own room, and then you'll be able to see your own bot working as well. So I hope that's helped. If there are any more questions, maybe I didn't explain it to you, just let me know and I'll try again. Once you've got it open, your Python script, just remember to replace the insert room ID here with the actual room ID you copied from earlier. Be sure to leave the quotation marks. And the other thing you need to change is where it says token, bearer, insert bot token here, leave the word bearer, leave the quotation marks again, and instead of insert bot token, just copy and paste your bot token, your bot access ID from earlier. So I'm going to paste that in and save. If you're following along on the lab guide, the section we are up to, I'll just pull this over. So we've done all of this. This is where we're up to. So you can see step 1 out of the 4 steps we're going to be doing is exchanging these pieces here with our current code. And you can see a little Giphy here that also shows you like what you need to be doing. So go ahead and get yourselves up to this spot here. And I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that, and then we will have to move on so you can finish this bot in time, or at least see a finished bot and then go away and continue finishing yours when you have all these resources too. Again, make sure you leave the quotation marks and you also leave the word bearer when you do the bot token. So all we're doing here is we're making sure that the bot posts the joke in the correct Teams room, and it also is able to authenticate itself, so it can actually post messages because it's verified its own identity by using that token. That's why we need these two pieces of information for our code to work. So what I'll do is walk through the code itself. No more changes need to be made here. So just make sure you save your work. And like I said, the code is sort of broken up into 4 components. The first one is making sure that we have the correct sort of IDs to post in the right place and the bot is authenticated to do what it needs to do. Now onto the actual code itself. So if you've not seen Python before, don't worry, we're going to go through it step by step. It's really, really quite straightforward. And I say that as someone who learned Python from scratch quite recently. Step 1, we want to get that joke from the database. So we do that by making an API call. We have a method, which is what this word def means. We're creating a new method in Python. The name of that method is getJoke. So it really well describes what is going to happen in this bit of code. The reason we have this method is so we can call it as many times as we want without having to repeat our code over and over again. We just have to repeat the name of the method that we're going to call instead. So we specify our API endpoint, and that's the URL. And you can actually visit this website and see information on how to use this API. There's more documentation so you know how to get started with it. But all you really need for this API to work is the URL, which is what I've got here, and you should be able to see on your own Python script. And also some header information. So for example, what encoding can we expect here? And that's JSON. We don't need to change or touch any of this. It's just a information that we send along with our API request. And this line, so line 40, is where we actually make the request itself. We do this by using the requests library, and I've imported that at the top. And this is just a lot of code that someone else has created. It allows you to make API calls in Python. Now, I could rewrite that and do it all myself from scratch, but I don't see any value in reinventing the wheel when it comes to code. And I think you should reuse code whenever you can. So I'm going to reuse someone else's code, which is importing requests, and that will allow me to make API calls from my Python script. The way you do that is you write requests.request. So I'm going to ask it to request something. It's going to do a get method because I'm trying to pull information. I'm trying to pull a joke from a database. My URL is what I've specified above. My headers are what I've specified above. And I'm just going to run that piece of code there. Whenever you make an API call in Python, it usually sends you some information response. So say, yes, this has gone smoothly, to okay, I've done exactly what you want me to do. Or it might say, you know what, I haven't been able to do it. Here's a status code that describes what the issue was. And that happens automatically every time you make an API call. So whatever that response is that comes back, I save it automatically in this variable called response. And then all I do is, out of all the things it sends back to me, so whether it's done it correctly or not, whether it's been successful, what time the API call was made, all of that sort of information, I filter it out. And all I want from that is the actual joke itself it has retrieved for me. So the final line here in this method is just saying, only extract the actual joke itself from all of this bit of information it's sent back, because that's all I really care about. So step 1 is getting the joke. Now, what's the next component of our code is, right, I have the joke, what do I do with it? Well, I need you to post it into the Webex Teams. And this is how I want to do it. So another method called def post joke. So def just means it's method. The name of the method is post joke. And the parameter I'm going to pass in is the joke I retrieved from step 1. Again, I have to define the endpoint. And you can see I've done that here, and you can get all of the information about what URL endpoint to use from developer.webex.com, and it will show you what sort of URL to use in order to make your API work. In my headers, I need to authorize my bot, first of all, to be able to post. No one should be able to post unless they're authorized to do so and have sort of their account with Webex Teams, etc. So And authorization is going to be the token we mentioned at the top of the script. So that's here. I'm just referring to that variable here instead of typing the whole thing out again. Content type application JSON, same as before. This time also got a bit of extra information. That's a payload. So a joke is not as straightforward as posting a joke, because when you want to post something, you need to give a bit more extra information. So for example, who's posting it? Well, it's the bot. That's why they're being authorized. Who are you posting it to? Well, this Teams room that we've got the room ID for. What is it that you're even posting? Like, what's the content of your message? And that's what these parameters here define for you. The room ID says where you're going to post it. The text is the actual content of the message. And that's the joke parameter that we passed in, that we retrieved earlier. And then authorization just says who is doing the posting, who is the message being sent from. So you can see how logically what you think about when you want to send a message is being translated into our Python code. Again, in line 57, we go ahead and make that API call. So we do request.request. Instead of get, we're now going to post something because we're trying to post our message. The URL is what I specified above. The data is what we've got over here. And the headers is what, again, is we don't need to worry too much about that. Any response you get, we're going to keep it and save it in this event called response, variable called response, sorry. And that's what step 3 of our code, or component 3 of our code is. So just to sort of zoom out and go over what we've done so far with the Python, the first thing is we specified our parameters. What is the room ID? What is the bot's access token? We went and retrieved the joke from the database. We posted the joke where we needed it to be done. And finally, we've got this last bit here called main. Now, this is basically saying it's how you trigger the rest of your code, to be straightforward. So we'll be using this a little bit more when we get to the Aws Lambda side of things. These methods don't just occur naturally. You have to ask them to go and run the code that sits within them. So what this main bit does is it just is you run the method that says go and get a joke. Step 2, post that joke for us. So the main bit kind of ties everything together. That's the point of it. So that's all of our Python code done. Hopefully you've managed to, in that time, copy and paste your room ID and bot token over. Now, what I want you to do once you've done that is, let me move this back over so you can see clearly, is head over to your terminal. Now that we've got our Python code ready, what we need to do is package it up in a way that AWS likes it to be packaged up, because we're going to be leveraging serverless technology here, function as a code. And when we want to push our code onto AWS, so we're going to have our code sitting there and hosted there, we need to kind of work with what it accepts and doesn't accept. So for example, one of the things we need to do in our code is import this existing library here called requests. And this is what native AWS. So what we need to do is separately package these dependencies in the same file as our code. And that's what we're going to do before we start uploading everything to Lambda. The way you do this is you head on over to your terminal. Let me clear this so it's clean. And you want to navigate to the directory where this chatbot.py is saved. So let me go to Athena 21, so that's where mine is. So again, remember, I'm doing this by change directory and then the name of the directory I want to go into. You can only select names that appear when you hit ls, so you can't do anything outside of here. So if you hit change directory Athena 21, and just to confirm I'm in the right directory, I'm going to hit ls once more to show me what's within it, and you can see chatbot.py. So I'm in the correct place. Now that I'm here, what you want to do is, if you have the lab guide open, just copy and paste the commands in, because it will say making a typo. I think typos will not let this work. It's really very sensitive. Basically, you want to make sure you get it absolutely correct. We're going to package up our dependency. So we're going to copy and paste this. And let me just explain what it is we're actually doing here. The pip install is downloading from sort of the pip database what it is that we need in terms of dependencies, and that's the requests library. It's not just going to save it anywhere, because if we wanted that to happen, we could skip out half of this code here. We want it saved in a specific folder. Now that folder is going to be called package. So what I'm saying here is we're going to install something, the requests for Python. And you're not just going to save it right here where I am. You're going to create a new folder called package. And you're going to save the request dependencies within that folder package. So I'm going to hit. You can see it starting to install those requests and save it in a folder called package. So I'm going to hit ls once again. Now, before I only had Chatbot. Now you can see I've also got package. So it's created a new folder called package. And if I go into it, so change directory to go into it, and I hit ls to look inside of it, you can see all the dependencies are within it. So we've done that correctly, right? So once you're inside of this package, so change directory into package, which is what I've done here. I'm inside of that folder now. And if you're not sure as well which folder you're within, because it's quite easy to get lost, just look at this name that comes up before your laptop's username sort of area here. So when I'm in the package folder, it says package. If I come out of here, you can see I'm in the folder Athena 21. Now, if I go back into the package, you'll see that change again to package. So you see where it is. Now, what you want to do is copy and paste the next command, which basically creates a zip folder called function.zip. And it will make that like right here where we are. So I'm going to do that. You can see it did it pretty quick. So you can see if I go now to Athena 21 and hit ls, originally only had chatbot.py, then we added the package file, and now we've actually got a third one called function.zip. So remember, you can copy and paste these all from the lab guide. So you've got the first one, which is installing the requests that you need in the target folder package. Then we go into that folder package, and now we zip all of those dependencies up, and we keep that in a folder or file called function.zip. And you can see function.zip has now been created here. Now we've created a function.zip for all the things that were in package, but what we haven't done is actually added our Python code into that same zip folder. And we're going to need that Python code when we upload this to AWS. So let's go back to where we were before. That's in package. And you're going to do this zip folder, this command here, which basically says add chatbot.py into the function.zip. Oh, I'm in the wrong folder, so I need to be in Athena. So I'm going to come out of that. Now you can see I'm in Athena, and now I'm going to run that command. And you can say it's added, you can see here that it has added chatbot.py into my function.zip. So now I'm ready to go and upload all of my code onto Amazon Web Services and get this going into our serverless function. Right. Now we get to upload, and you can see, let me just see if I can pull up my slides real quick again in terms of components. Just skip to the end. This is what we've done so far. We've created our bot. Our bot exists. We have created our code. So our code here exists. Now remember, we talked about that missing piece in the middle of connecting our bot to the code that controls its behavior. This is what we're going to be working on.
Chani, just very quickly, because there's another question that I think is quite important to go through. So Eleanor is asking, where do we paste the pip install part? So it might be worth to go through that again if you can.
Yes, definitely. That is a very good question. So let me go back up to my lab guide. So you want to go into the directory chat.py folder file saved. For me, if I just open, for example, my Finder, this is where my chatbot.py file is saved. And I know that's in users /cpanchow/code/Athena 21. So I need to make sure I'm in Athena 21 before I do pip install. That's where you need to do it. So make sure you're in the folder that chatbot.py is in, and then run that code. But a brilliant question. It's important to do this in the right place. So go ahead and install the requests into the package folder, which you can see has come up now here as well. You want to go into that package folder and zip them up into function.zip. And finally, you want to go back into that parent directory, so back into the Athena one, and chatbot into function.zip. And this is just the packaging up of all of our code and dependencies, so AWS is happy to work with them. Right, so now that we've got it all packaged up, we're going to start uploading it to our Lambda function. So if you head on over to your AWS, which you hopefully have got your account for now, what I will do is just wait maybe a minute and a half before I move on, just because if you don't have your AWS account, you need to make that now. So I'll just give you a minute and a half for anyone who hasn't managed to have their registration to AWS to do that now. Okay, I'm going to start moving forward just a little bit because I want to make sure we finish. And I know that this will be on YouTube, and also the lab guide takes you through the rest of it. So if you're not completely up to scratch, don't worry, you can definitely use a lab guide to keep going after this session is over, and contact me as well if you need to. When you're on your AWS and you've logged in, this is the screen you should sort of see. And what you want to do is click on Services on the top left-hand corner. First thing we're going to do is we're going to upload all of our code onto AWS, all the packaging that we've just done, upload it all, because this is where our code is going to sit, and this is how we're going to leverage this idea of serverless technology. I'm not here going to worry about security of my application. I'm not going to worry so much about how the networking is going to work or what kind of server my code is sitting on. AWS is going to handle all of that for me. I'm going to go into my code. So we have services on the top corner. Then under compute, you want to look for Lambda. So go ahead, and you can even see actually when I highlight over it, they've described that as run code without thinking about servers. So it really makes things easy and straightforward for you. Go ahead and select Lambda. Now you can see I've got something here from before, but that's not something you would probably have if this is new to you. So it might be completely blank, but that's fine. It doesn't really matter. This is just something from before. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new function. So go ahead and hit create function on the top right-hand side, the orange button. And you can see a couple of examples here. From the top selection, we're just going to stay with what it's already defaultly selected, so author from scratch. And we're going to give our function a name. So you can name it whatever you want. I'm going to call mine Athena because that's what we're creating here. In terms of runtime, you want to change that to the latest supported Python, which is 3.8, because it's Python that we're going to upload. And once you've given your function a name and your runtime a name, so sorry, not a name, you've selected the correct runtime, which is Python 3.8, go ahead and hit create function. So we'll just wait for that to go ahead and create this for us. And for anyone who's still catching up, you can see at the top of the as well here, we've gone from services, Lambda, and then create function. So that's where we are at the moment. Now we want to upload our code. So what you can see here is a window that says code source. You want to select upload from just on the side of this panel on the page. And we've got a .zip file, so that's what we're going to upload. Go ahead and upload the zip for function.zip, which we created in the previous step. So I'm going to go and find mine. It was in code, Athena, and this function.zip is what we want. So not the package and not the individual Python file, but the function.zip folder that we created with everything inside of it. So go ahead and upload the function.zip. And you can see that's all uploaded for me. On the left-hand side, you can see all the dependencies that were packaged in within it, and also the Python itself. So you can see it's been packaged correctly because it has everything it needs. Now we need to change a couple of settings here. And the way we're going to do that is, first of all, runtime settings, just underneath code source. Let's go ahead and edit this. Runtime is 3.8, that's correct. But our handler needs to be changed. So you need to change this to what is it that you want to be triggered when our webhook goes and hits that start button. So remember at the beginning of the session, we said we want our webhook to listen out for something. And when it hears it, it's going to say, you know what, start running this code. Like that's the trigger, let's go. Well, what is it you want to kick things off? And now look at the Python script that we put together. It had, you know, the step 1 of go and retrieve a joke, step 2 of post the joke, but then it had this main folder, this main method, sorry, that said tie step 1 and step 2 together. So, you know, step 1 is going to be this and step 2 is going to be that, and you're going to do it in this order. That's the main method. That's the bit we want to trigger off because that sets the other two up. It kind of ties everything together. In the Python file chatbot.py, so you start your handler by writing the name of the Python file, which is chatbot. And then all you need to do after that is write the method within there that you would like to execute when you hit that start button. So it's going to be the main method. So for all of you guys who are following along and who have edited and uploaded your Python file, you should also be writing chatbot.main in the handler section. All we're saying again is the trigger for us here is going to be you go to the chatbot Python script and the main method within that script, and that's what you run. So hit save. The last setting you need to change is when you can see code source here, just above it, there's a couple of different options. If you head over to configuration, you can see there's a timeout. Now the default is 3 seconds, but what we want to do is just do it just in time. For our script to finish running, we would change that to about a minute. It wouldn't take a minute for it to work, but it just says if you know it is taking more than a minute, then time it out. Otherwise, you're all good. So just change that from 3 seconds to a minute and hit save. And your function as a code has been uploaded. So your serverless part of this is almost done. Before we move on to the next bit, let's just have one quick review of where we're up to in terms of our architecture. So I'll populate this. We've got the bot. So we've done this bit. Step 1, create your chatbot. We did that pretty quick. The next bit was this bit here, the Python code itself, understanding the method of retrieving a joke and posting the joke as well. Now posting it to an API over here. This is where we're up to at the moment. So we've uploaded our code onto AWS. The final thing we need to do is set this webhook out for you. When you mess that bot, it will say, right, go ahead and start running this code. So there's two parts to creating this. First of all, it's the webhook that listens out for the event, which is us messaging the bot. And the second one is saying, let's hit the start button. So let's go ahead and create that start button first, which is going to execute this code. And then what we'll do is finish off by creating the webhook, which is listening out and connecting to that start button. So I will come out of these slides, go back onto AWS. Now, remember, we went from services to Lambda. Now what we're going to do is go from services all the way down to the bottom here where it says API Gateway. So that's under networking and content delivery. Go ahead and select API Gateway. Again, I have one from before. This is one I made quite a few months ago, but we're going to create a new one today. So let's create an API. There's quite a few different options, and they all work in slightly different ways. The API that we're going to be creating today is a REST API. Now there's two options. Be sure to select the correct one, and that's the one that says you have complete control over the API management capabilities. That's the one we're going to build. So go ahead and hit build. You want to choose a name for your API, something that is easy for you to recognize with what it is that you're doing. So this API is going to trigger off our joke. That's what the point of this API is. So let's go ahead and name this. I'll call it trigger joke because that's what it will do for me. And I'm going to hit create API. Now it's quite empty. There's no information about this API that I've created. So let's go ahead and populate it a little bit more. With an API, there's multiple different things you try and map. For example, with Webex Teams, you could create messages, you could create rooms, you could do all sorts of different activities with APIs, and that kind of helps you define, the last sort of slash bit helps you define what it is you're working with. We call that a resource. So for example, if I go on to developer.webex.com, all of these things here that you can control via APIs are resources. So let's create a resource of our own for our API. The resource name should relate to what it is that we're doing. For us, we are, sending a message, I guess. So I'm going to call my resource messages. Every time I want to do something about that, I can put it in here. Once you've given that your name, just hit create resource. And now within that, what do we want to be able to do? So for example, within rooms, what are the different things we can do about rooms? This is where we define with messages what we can do. Now this method is going to post a message for us. It's going to post from the joke, from our code, to our Webex Teams room. So that's why we've gone with the post message, the post method here. You want an integration type of Lambda function, so leave that as it is. You want to select this checkbox of using Lambda proxy integration, as our code is also on Lambda. And the function is what you created before. So if you remember when you uploaded, when you first went onto AWS and you pressed the create function button, that's what you want to put into here. So mine is AthenaBot. That's where I named mine. So I'll type that in, and you can see already as you start typing, it does pre-populate it for you here. You just select it. So integration type of Lambda. You want to use Lambda proxy integration, and you want to use the function that you've just created. Make sure it's the exact same name, and hit save. You get this message here, okay, and you have created your API. So you can see slowly we're making our way through all the different components of having this working chatbot. The final thing I need to do with this is I just need to deploy it. So it's ready to go, but with AWS, Amazon Gateway, you can play around and do some testing before you go ahead and deploy. We don't need to do so much of that just now. We just need to go ahead and deploy and get our chatbot working. So go ahead and hit deploy. If we had more time, we could play around and test it and make sure everything's as smooth as we want. This is the place to do it. When you're asked for a deployment stage, you can choose this to be whatever you want. So in, like sort of live examples, you might have a test environment and environment. Initially create something, you might put it in the test, make sure it doesn't disrupt anything that already exists, and when you're happy with it, then move it on to a production environment. We don't have all of this right now, it's just a simulated workshop, so I'm just going to create a stage name for production and hit deploy. And there we go, our API is ready for us to use. Now there's one more piece of information you need to take from here before we move on. If you hit your drop-down list for production, messages and post, select that post button. Now what you'll see is an invoke URL. So that means basically this is your start button. When I talk about this idea of hitting a start button in order to execute the code, what you're actually doing is invoking this API. This is the start button, if you like. I'm going to copy that because I'm going to need it later on, and I suggest you guys copy and paste that over as well, because we'll be using it in the final stage of this. And then we'll have a one chatbot. So the final thing here to do now is to link everything together. We have a chatbot, we have a code that's ready sitting in Aws Lambda waiting to be triggered. We've even got the start button that now knows how to trigger the code. All we need to do is link us sending a message to the bot to that start button being pushed. And we're going to do that using a Webex Teams webhook. So go ahead and head over to developer.webex.com. Hit documentation. And on the left-hand side, go to API reference. So similar to where we were before. You want to scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says webhooks and select it. So now we're going to create a webhook that's going to listen out for a particular event. So you can see all the descriptions on the right-hand side. Click that corresponds to the webhook. You should see a little panel open up on the right-hand side, like you can see on my window here. You can see some of it's pre-populated, but there are a few required areas here that we need to fill in still ourselves. The first thing you want to do here is unslide this button so you're not using your personal access token, but instead you're using the bot's access token. Because remember, all of this message posting is not being done from our personal accounts, it's being done by the bot. So we need to remove our personal token and in here paste the bot access token which you copied from earlier. So we're going to copy and paste that over. You want to name your webhook, so you can call this whatever you want. It's just use, if you ever go back and list webhooks, you can tell just from the name of it what the purpose of that webhook is. So you want it to be fairly descriptive. I'm going to put Athena joke, so that's for. The target URL is this webhook is saying here in this field, once I'm triggered, once I hear what it is I'm listening out for, what do you want me to do? Like, what shall I post my URL to? What shall I invoke? And that's the API URL you just copied from your AWS. So this invoke URL, what's that start button? So you're going to copy and paste that over to the target URL field. Resource. So remember, resource is what is it that you're trying to manage? We're trying to manage Webex Teams messages. Sure, yeah, messages with an S on the end. And okay, you're managing messages, but what do you want to do with messages? If, you know, like, what is it that we're listening out for in terms of messages? Well, we're listening out for a message to be created. We want this message to be created and sent to a bot. So that's why I've got messages here and created here, because these two fields here are asking, what are you listening out for? Finally, you can filter it. It's optional. You don't have to. I choose to filter this because I don't want my bot to respond to every single message posted in a particular Teams room. I only want it to respond if I talk directly to the bot. So I've put an extra filter here that says mentioned people equals me. And that just means the bot will only respond with a joke if you directly speak to that bot, not if you speak to someone else in a group Teams room and the bot's just present and listening in. So let's hit run. You can see that I've got potentially not copied and pasted the bot access token incorrectly, so I'll try that again. Should say 200 okay directly. So let's try this again. Ah, there we go, 200 okay. So I must have pasted something in wrong. So now we've created our webhook. So once we've done this, I'm going to head over now and do sort of the test of truth. I'm going to go back to my Teams room and I'm going to mention my bot and I'm going to see if all of the components together work. So let me talk to Athena bot. Remember, we filtered it to only listen if we directly talk to it. So I have to at it if I speak to it, basically, otherwise it won't listen. And I'm going to say, send me a joke. If I hit send, and this has all worked correctly, it will return with a joke from the database. So you can see here, AthenaBot has returned a joke. Why are basketball players messy? So again, for the quality of these jokes, you've created a working chatbot now, and you've done that by leveraging serverless technology that allowed you to completely ignore the stuff that comes alongside application development that necessarily you might not care about, such as the networking, the deployment, all of that kind of stuff. You've pushed that to someone else, your AWS provider, like your cloud provider. It doesn't have to be AWS, could be whatever you choose. In this case, it was AWS. And you've just focused on the code, the bot, the behavior, and achieving what your goal is. So you can go ahead and in any scenario that you might be using for your hacks, suppose you need some sort of alerting system, you want a user to be notified of something, you can go ahead and use Webex Teams bots to notify people of whatever it is you're listening out for, and just host your code on serverless platforms such as Aws Lambda to make your life so much simpler. And this guide, you can just adapt it. What does, and that's the only thing you would have to change if you went ahead and leverage this in your hack. So I appreciate that maybe the last 15-20 minutes was sped up a little bit. I just really did want to finish this so you could see a working bot. Please go ahead and finish it in your own time if you haven't been able to do it now, because it'll be worth the work that you've done for the past hour and a half to actually see it working in the end. And if you do have questions, I'd be happy for you to email me and contact me, and we can work through things together. I'll pause there. Is there any questions or anything else I should cover before we finish?
We'll just give it a second for those questions to filter through, Chadney, but just a big thank you for giving up your time to be here. I know that it's not easy. So yeah, a big thank you to you. That was super helpful, especially as someone like myself who is very much not a Python expert, not any kind of coding expert. It was yeah, good to kind of follow along. So keep an eye on the YouTube comments. But as Chadney said, if there's any kind of wider questions, hopefully everyone's on our Discord server by now. You can message me if you need Chadney's details. Again, just Alex showcode on our Discord, and I can provide any kind of questions like that. This will be available to rewatch. You know, you can go back, follow the steps again if you need to. Like Chadney said, it may have been slightly rushed to get to the end for the last 15 minutes. But yeah, other than that, I think just a big thank you to everyone that's attended, and to Chadney, Roger, and Pedro for presenting and being on hand. It doesn't look to be too many questions, so I think if you'd like to say a kind of a final goodbye, Chadney, then yeah, that'd be great.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you again to Roger and Pedro for supporting with the questions and the links and all of that stuff.
Amazing.
If you have questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch.
Thank you very much. On that note, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, everybody. And day one of Athena is officially over. We hope to see you again tomorrow.